The sun was sinking behind the red cliffs when the dust began to rise from the distant horizon, a rolling storm of earth and thunder that spoke of riders coming fast. Out on the prairie, every ranch hand froze where he stood, tools and talk falling silent as the echo of hooves carried across the valley. On the fence line, a weathered cowboy named Ethan Cole narrowed his eyes beneath the brim of his hat. He had seen enough wars and riders to know that this was no cattle drive. The dust moved with purpose. It moved like ghosts. As the herd of horses broke through the haze, the wind carried a memory that made Ethan's heart stop. A voice from long ago, one he'd buried deep in the ache of time. 15 years back, on a night when thunder split the sky, he had found a half-starved Apache girl in the ruins of a burned camp, her eyes wild with fear and grief. He'd wrapped her in his coat, given her food, and carried her to safety when no one else would. Her name was Kaya. He never saw her again after that, only heard whispers that she'd been taken east by her people, healed and vanished into legend. And now, as the lead rider burst from the dust, spear raised and war paint flashing under the dying sun, he saw her, grown, fierce, and riding like a spirit of vengeance. The ranch hands panicked, grabbing rifles, but Ethan raised a hand. "Hold your fire," he said, his voice steady, the kind that could cut through chaos. He stepped forward slowly, boots sinking into the dry earth, every heartbeat pounding louder than the approaching thunder. The lead rider pulled her horse to a stop just yards away, dust swirling between them like a curtain of time. Her eyes met his, sharp, blazing, unyielding, and for a moment neither spoke. Then she dismounted, boots hitting the ground with the authority of a leader who feared nothing. "You remember me, cowboy?" she asked, her tone carrying both accusation and gratitude, like the edge of a blade wrapped in silk. Ethan took off his hat slowly, his weathered face softening. "I'd never forget the girl I pulled from fire," he said quietly. She nodded once, her gaze flicking toward the horizon, where hundreds of mounted warriors waited in silence, their spears catching the light like shards of the sun. "You saved me when no one else did," she said. "And now I've come back to return what was given." Ethan's heart swelled with pride and sorrow as he looked at her. The child he'd once carried was now the war chief of her people, leading them with fire in her eyes. She told him of the years that followed, the camps where she'd learned to fight, the elders who taught her the old ways, and the vow she made under the stars to return to the man who had shown her mercy when the world had forgotten her. She spoke of a new danger rising from the borderlands, men with greed in their hearts, burning villages and stealing land, the same kind who once took everything from her tribe. And now she and her warriors rode to stop them, to reclaim the earth their ancestors had bled for. Ethan listened in silence, then nodded. "Then I reckon you'll need a guide," he said, his voice low and resolute. "The land's changed since you last saw it." She smiled faintly, the ghost of a child's smile buried in the strength of a leader. "You always were stubborn, cowboy," she said. "I'd be honored to have you ride with us." That night, the stars watched over them like ancient witnesses. The Apache fires burned bright against the canyon walls, their shadows dancing with the wind. Ethan sat by the flames listening to their songs, songs of the old world, of spirits, loss, and honor. Kaya sat across from him, her face lit by firelight, her eyes reflecting the flames like mirrors of destiny. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Helping me?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Some things you do because they're right. Not because they promise peace," she nodded, the weight of her warrior's trust resting on her shoulders. "Then tomorrow," she said softly, "we ride together one last time." When dawn came, it painted the land in gold and blood. The sound of hooves once again thundered across the valley, not in fear but in defiance. Ethan rode beside Kaya, his old horse keeping pace with the younger mounts, his rifle slung low and steady. Ahead, the men who'd burned and stolen waited, their greed-blind eyes unready for the storm that approached. Kaya raised her spear high, her voice carrying across the wind like a cry from the heart of the earth. "For the forgotten!" she shouted. "For the ones who came before." And with that, the warriors charged. The sky seemed to roar as the two forces collided, dust, fire, and thunder merging into a single moment of reckoning. Ethan rode like a man who had nothing left to lose but everything to defend. When the dust settled, silence fell heavy across the plains. The raiders were gone, their greed buried under the weight of justice. Kaya stood tall on her horse, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes meeting Ethan's across the field. She rode to him, dismounted, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave me life," she said quietly. "Now I've given peace to yours." Ethan smiled, tired but proud. "Guess we're even then," they laughed. Soft and human, beneath the endless western sky, she turned her horse toward the rising sun, her warriors following in solemn formation, and for a long time, Ethan watched them disappear into the horizon. The girl he'd once saved, now a legend riding into eternity. As the wind swept across the land, Ethan tipped his hat to the empty plains. "Ride on, little one," he whispered. "Ride on." And for those listening, for those who still believe that one act of kindness can echo through time, don't just watch the story. Be part of it. Subscribe to the channel and join this growing frontier of stories that remind us kindness, courage, and redemption never die. They just ride into the next sunrise.